Greetings! It is I, Countess Naravan Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome! It is time to continue my discussion on the various campaign settings of Dungeons & Dragons. Many of these that date back to, of course, AD&D, Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. The first one we started with was Spelljammer, Dungeons & Dragons Adventures in Space! So, let's continue with Spelljammer today. Of course, what we're going to talk about is some more maneuvers that you can use with your ships in ship-to-ship combat. We've right now have been talking about that close-range ship combat, where your ships are going side by side, maybe ramming into each other. Now there is another maneuver that two ships approaching each other into close combat can do. A attacking ship can attempt to shear. Shear is basically cutting out rigging and all this other stuff that helps with maneuverability for the defending ship. The idea is to get close enough not to hit the other ship, but to knock into all this kind of maneuverability gear, the rigging, the ropes, the steering equipment, all the other kind of devices which helps them to move, and to cripple those, destroy them, using your ship sort of to ram that stuff, not ram the ship directly. Now, a shearing attack, if it's successful, reduces the maneuverability of the ship that's being sheared by one class. Now, it is important to note that this reduction in maneuverability can only occur twice from shearing attacks. So if my maneuverability is, let's say, C, first time it reduces it to D, second time it reduces it to E, really messing up my maneuverability. Now, granted, you can still reduce the maneuverability of this ship by even more. Things like critical hits and other attacks made to reduce maneuverability can do so. Now, when I'm attempting a shearing attack, it's going to be my helmsman, the person, of course, at the helm that's using their attack bonus to figure out if I'm successful or not on this attack. If my ship does not have a helmsman at it, basically not have someone at the spelljamming helm, whatever kind of navigator is in charge of it is going to use their attack, but treat it as if they had a level half of what they normally have for determining their attack bonuses. So, though they still get some of their other bonuses, basically the bonus they get from level, halved. So they're not as effective when it comes to attempting shearing attack as a helmsman would be. Now, if my shearing attack fails, guess what? This ship over here, the defending one, it can attempt a shearing attack of its own. Basically, you messed up, didn't shear me, I get this free attempt to cut away at some of your own maneuverability. So there is a little bit of danger when it comes to attempting shearing attacks. Now, shearing attack itself, well, guess what? It doesn't do any damage. You're not directly doing any kind of hull point damage to the ship you're attacking. You're only trying to damage external or extra parts of the ship that help it to, well, maneuver. Though it is important to note that if I'm attempting to shearing and I roll a 20, I will score a critical hit, like I would score any other kind of critical hit. Granted, the exact details of how this is caused will be up to your dungeon master to determine it, but a critical hit, even on shearing, will do the critical hit effects that you might get in a normal kind of attack. So that's important to know. Now let's talk a little bit more about grappling as it relates to, well, boarding. Now, this ship over here that you're attacking, oftentimes, it's more valuable to get it intact. Destroying this ship and scuttling it, breaking it into pieces, that's all well and good, but capturing a ship might be the goal that you have. There's valuable crew on there for various reasons. Maybe you're slavers. Maybe it's got treasure you don't want lost to space. Maybe the shipping itself, capturing it, you could tow it back to port and sell it. Lots of reasons for you to, well, capture a ship. So boarding is your best bet. You don't want to cause major damage. You want to throw your crew members over to here, take out their crew members, and take over the ship. And you yourself on your attacking ship, you might have the manpower to do it. You might not. That's going to be something we're going to talk about in a minute. Effectively, you move into position, you grapple with them, and then what you can do? You can board. You can go on board and start fighting them. Now, of course, their easiest way to grapple would be using a grappling ram. That grapple's on there. But it's not the only way. Now, once the two ships move in close, both of them have an opportunity to initiate a grapple. First, it's going to be the ship that's maneuvering. So the ship that has the initiative, the ship that's coming in here and choosing to get very close into the same square, moving by there, they get the first opportunity to grapple. Then this ship over here gets the same opportunity. They can attempt to grapple. The purpose of this is, of course, to, for one thing, board each other, but also you want to create grapple lines because if you want to tow the other ship, you need the grapple together to successfully do that, to drag one of the ships around. Now, the most common is, of course, large grappling hooks, attached to something, thrown overboard to hook onto the other ship. Now, you can also have ballistas that have special bolts with grapples attached at the end that you can fire into the other ship. But regardless, you set up a whole bunch of lines and then connect the two of them together. So they're effectively one ship in a way then. They're both connected, moving together in a way. Well, not moving in a way most of the time. We're not going to talk about towing today, but let's assume we're connected together, we're immobile, we're just sitting there in space. Now, you're going to have some kind of rope or chain attached to your grappling hook, hooking them together. You're going to want about 5 feet on either side of a grapple once you hit onto it. So you do have to look at the length of the ship and how much kind of space you have for hooking lines onto it. So figuring out how much you're going side by side and how much space you have to set up your people throwing hooks, how much space they have to hook it, is important numbers because it tells you how many attempts you can make to hook it, and then it's just attempting to be successful in hooking it together. Now, here's where we crunch the numbers of figuring out if you're grappled or not. When you compare the two ships, you look to the smaller ship and its tonnage. 1/10 of the smaller ship's tonnage is the number of lines that need to be between the two ships to grapple him. So if I have a 50-ton ship here and a 40-ton ship here, I need 4 lines. 1/10 of 40 is 4. Then those 4 lines are connected between these two ships. Guess what? We are grappled together. Now let's say this 50-ton one manages to get 3 lines over to here. This ship, it doesn't want to be connected. Guess what can happen? It can just fly off, and because we did not have enough hit hooks, they all break. They don't hold it. Once you hit those 4 lines, guess what? We're hooked together. But if you don't hit it, this one can just break them and go. That's actually a way you can get a couple extra grapples, is you wait until they throw a couple of lines. Not enough, and then you just fly away with them. Free grapples. So grapples, they don't do any damage. They're made just to hook two ships together. And once you hit that magic number of X, number of grapples, you two are immobilized. Again, you could attempt a towing maneuver now, but we're not diving into that today. Now, when two ships are attempting to grapple, and even if they do get grappled, crewmen don't just need to stand there. Most of the time, your average grappling line has an AC of 10, and most ropes have about 5 hit points. So, I mean, it doesn't take a lot to cut away and break a grapple line. Now, chains, they tend to be a little harder to break, more hit points, depending on your addition, either more AC or maybe even some hardness that you have to break through to get through chain, but it's also something that could be broken in order to separate a grapple. And you, as someone cutting out that lines, can do it any time on the defending ship's turn, but there is that problem that most likely if a grapple's been initiated, the ship that's grappling has already begun boarding. You can actually board the round you grapple an enemy ship. I throw those lines out, and as long as I have a number of men ready, I can drop the plank, have them swarm over. If they're ready to board, they can do it in that same turn. They can effectively standing there with the big plank ready, they're finally grappled, immobilized, thwomp, drop it, board over there. Once an enemy ship is boarded, you hit classic Dungeons & Dragons combat. However it is, whatever edition it is, you enter into just a basic D&D combat situation. We're not talking Spelljammer now, we're talking basic rules. Now, there is some rapid versions of combat that we can talk about, especially if we're dealing with a lot of NPCs in there, and we want to effectively eliminate all the NPC combat situations. We'll be talking about that one in the next episode. But for now, assume that all the other NPCs are battling it out. Now your PCs, or maybe some important NPCs, can have their own battles, which they'll be resolving, while your mooks will be in the background doing their thing. Basically, we don't want to roll out every little crewman's battle that's not important NPCs. They'll be doing their own thing. Now, either side, either crew will fight until it's completely defeated, or until one side fails a morale check. This can either be the boarding side or the defending side. They both have that opportunity of possible morale checks. Now, PCs, of course, and important NPCs will fight to their own discretion. We don't worry about morale checks for them. Morale checks are only for our mooks, our basic carbon cutout NPCs in the background. Those important ones, maybe like the captain or the PCs, they're not dealing with morale. Each and every one of them have their own idea of when they might surrender or if they would fight to the death. Now, there is some exceptions, especially when it comes to boarding. You could get into a dangerous situation. If I order my crew to board a beholder ship or a mind flare ship or something like that, they might be a little hesitant on doing this. You can actually force your crew to have a morale check to even board an enemy ship. It's like, go ahead, board and conquer that beholder ship. They're like, no? Or that mind flare ship where they might psychically destroy your mind. No! You would make this morale check after you ordered them to do this, but before they would carry it out. They kind of have to build themselves up to want to actually do this horrible thing you're pushing them to do. Now, regardless, when a morale check is failed, the failing side retreats back to their native ship, basically the ship they came from. Now, if you're aboard their native ship, let's say you invade a crew, you defeated enough that they surrender, that's what they do. They surrender if they're aboard their native ship. This is unless the morale check is made upon your native ship when you're trying to force them to go into dangerous situations, then they just stay there. They're not surrendering. They're like, no, not enough pay, not enough anything. We're not doing that. But again, we look to see what ship is where. If my evading force upon you is thrust back, they will retreat, failing morale. If you're defeated upon your ship, well, your crew is at least, they will surrender. There are certain cases when dealing with certain kinds of races and situations where a defending crew or a crew will not surrender depending on the morale check. They might still fight to the death. Good example would be, let's say a Nyogi ship attacks your ship. People know that Nyogi take slaves and do horrible things to them. So, of course, your crew, even if it fails a morale check, will not survive. They might be a little demoralized, but they will continue to fight because no one wants to be captured by a Nyogi. They will fight to the death. So you can get your crew to fight to the death depending on the circumstances. But again, it's depending on what you're dealing with. You have to know that the threat to you is real enough. They have to understand that, and then they might be willing to do that. But that's it for today. So, I talked a little bit about some maneuvers you can do. Shearing, grappling, and boarding. Of course, there's some more details we're going to deal with, and that's what we're going to dive into in the next episode. Dealing with combat aboard the ships. We're not talking your PC's combat. We're not talking your important NPCs like your mighty heroes are dueling with the captain of a ship. We're talking about those situations where Mook Crew A is battling Mook Crew B, and we want to handle it without a lot of dice rolling. We'll dive into that in the next episode. But I hope you're having a great day. If you've had any kind of ship-to-ship combat or invading a ship, whether in Spelljammer or just on the high seas, maybe tell me a story about it. Those are always some interesting situations. I've got some great stories that I could always share. But until the next time, I bid you farewell.